welcome to another episode of Accessibility. It's a show on YouTube where I talk about the video game industry, accessibility and representation. Basically, how can we help more people to play games and more people to see themselves in the games they play? Now, believe it or not, next generation gaming is right around the corner. I mean, in 6 weeks, next generation consoles are going to be out. I mean, if you're waiting for the PlayStation 5, you're going to have to wait an extra week in the UK, but the Xbox Series X will be out everywhere, and the PlayStation 5 will be out everywhere except for the UK where I want to get my one. In as little as 6 weeks. 7 in the UK. Not bitter at all. That's amazing to me because we still don't know so much about what these consoles actually are. They are right around the corner. The Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S, the PlayStation 5 are imminently releasing, and we have so many questions still. One of my biggest questions right now, as someone who is heavily invested in accessibility in games, is just how accessible are this next generation of games going to be for disabled players? One of my biggest questions right now about next gen, as someone who closely follows accessibility in games, is how accessible or not the next generation consoles are going to be for gamers with disabilities on launch day. Will players who have found ways to play games on current gen hardware still be able to play on those new consoles? Is one console looking noticeably more accessible than the other? Are there any new hurdles for accessibility we can expect on these new machines? So, I thought today we would take a look at the next generation of games consoles. What do we currently know about them in terms of accessibility? What's looking promising? What's looking worrying? And what questions do we need to see answered before these consoles launch? So, let's start with what we know about the Xbox Series S and Series X consoles. The most obvious accessibility advantage the Xbox Series consoles have going into this next generation is that their new consoles will support all controllers which were supported on the Xbox One. The new consoles don't have any fancy new tech supported in their controllers, so all of your existing controllers will work with your new games. This is a pro-consumer move in general. It allows people with multiple working Xbox controllers to not have to buy new controllers needlessly if they want to play multiplayer games, but it's also incredibly important from an accessibility standpoint. For any disabled gamers who found third-party Xbox One controllers that featured accessibility settings, such as turbo buttons or slightly different button layouts, those controllers will still be supported for next-gen games. If you had a custom controller made by a charity such as Special Effect, it's likely to still work on the next generation of Xbox consoles. And perhaps most notably, the Xbox Adaptive Controller will be supported on the next generation of Xbox consoles from launch day. That's important. For those not in the loop, the Xbox Adaptive Controller is a modular controller for the PC and Xbox One, which allows first and third-party peripherals to be substituted in place of regular controller button inputs. If you have trouble with manipulating small analog sticks, you could plug in USB joysticks to use instead. If you struggle to press left and right triggers with your index fingers, you could map those button inputs to foot pedals. Microsoft created a modular controller base that allows for huge amounts of hardware-based accessibility setups for much cheaper than most custom bespoke solutions, and it has been incredibly helpful as an option for a large number of disabled gamers. While the Xbox Adaptive Controller is a cheaper solution than most on the market for hardware-based gaming accessibility, it is still fairly pricey to create some gaming setups. The fact that gamers that have invested in making a working setup already won't have to purchase a new accessibility controller to move on to next gen removes a huge financial barrier to upgrading consoles. Also, and I think this deserves to be highlighted, the Xbox Series X and Series S will be the first consoles ever to have official support for a disability-focused controller on release day, which is a really exciting step in the right direction for our industry. Assuming that Microsoft doesn't do away with existing accessibility features from the Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S players can hopefully expect a few software-based accessibility settings to also be available at launch. From co-pilot mode, which allows 2 players with 2 controllers to share control of a single character, sharing inputs between them, to system-level button remapping, screen magnifiers to high-contrast menus, speech-to-text and screen reader support, Microsoft already has a pretty decent selection ready of system-level accessibility settings, which will hopefully be available at launch on the Series S and Series X. X. While the Xbox Series S and Series X both support Xbox One controllers, Microsoft are releasing new controllers for the new consoles. And while their layouts are essentially identical, one positive step forward is that the new controllers are apparently lighter to hold and smaller, reshaped to be more easily held by a wider range of hand sizes and strengths. This could potentially make the default controller more accessible to more players. Overall, heading into the next generation of consoles, I actually feel quite optimistic about the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X. I think that Microsoft is saying all the right things. On paper, everything we have heard suggests that they are not shutting away existing accessibility support and trying to move forward, and that's wonderful. Sony, on the other hand, I have concerns about. Sony is staying very tight-lipped about exactly what they're doing with their next generation box in terms of accessibility, and what we do know raises more questions than it answers, and that's worrisome. So, much like the Xbox Series S and X, let's start our PlayStation 5 discussion by looking at their new controller. Unlike Microsoft, who are supporting Xbox One controllers for next-gen games, Sony is doing away with support for PlayStation 4 controllers. You can use them to play PS4 games, but for any PS5-specific games you will need to use their new PS5 DualSense controller. The PS5 controller features all the same button inputs as the PS4 controller, in essentially the same positions. The new controller is larger and a little heavier, which may make it a little more difficult for some players to comfortably hold and use, depending on hand size and hand strength. So, what new functionality does this controller pack into it to justify not supporting backwards compatibility with PS4 controllers? Well, there are two main new features: haptic feedback and resistive triggers. Overly simplified, haptic feedback means fancy rumble. If your character is running over a stone road, then steps onto sand, the vibrations in your controller will apparently feel noticeably different, allowing you to feel the difference between different types of in-game material. Resistive triggers basically mean that in some games, when you try to pull the triggers, they may resist being pulled. Imagine pulling a bowstring. The further you pull the trigger in, the more it will resist being pushed, and may even actively try to push the trigger back out to a resting position. Now, Sony have currently not confirmed whether either of these features will be mandatory on the PS5, or if they will be able to be switched off on a system level. Hopefully, both of them can be opted out of, as rumble can cause issues for some disabled players, and any players with hand or finger pain or weakness may well struggle to interact with trigger buttons which are resisting being pushed. Both of these features would, in an ideal world, be completely optional. They'd be ways for some gamers to feel more immersed in game worlds, but their inclusion wouldn't be a barrier to those who aren't physically able to engage with them. I hope that this is the case, but right now Sony simply will not say. And I guess this is the big question. If those features are completely optional, why not support players using the smaller and lighter PS4 controllers they already own? You're shutting off a controller option which may be more accessible to push hopefully optional controller features that, while impressive on paper, may be a barrier to some PS4 players moving up to a PS5. For players who have found workarounds to game on the PS4, such as working out how to hook their PS4 controller into an Xbox adaptive controller, this will likely mean having to start over completely from scratch and find an entirely new workaround to be able to keep gaming on Sony's new console. Mark Friend, Sony's accessibility specialist, did poll Twitter users back in the spring about accessibility concerns people might have about that DualSense controller. The tweet has since been deleted, but many users raised the same concerns I have today about the ability to opt out of settings such as resistive triggers. Friend did not state publicly if any feedback would translate into changes for the PS5, and Sony has not publicly stated yet if these controller features will be optional or not. Additionally, Sony recently released an add-on for the PS4 controller, which allowed players to add two bumpers to the back of the controller. This was designed first and foremost for gamers wanting to more rapidly press buttons in competitive games, but it's also accidentally really useful for disabled gamers who might need buttons placed on a different part of the controller. Microsoft supports back bumper buttons, but only if you buy their much more expensive Elite controllers. Sony has not confirmed if this add-on will be supported on the PS5 controller, but if it is, that could be a positive mark for the PlayStation 5. Assuming Sony keeps all of their system-level PS4 accessibility accessibility settings in place for the PS5, we can expect to see the system launch with system-level button remapping, screen magnification, the ability to invert colours, high contrast menu settings, and the ability to make system menu text larger or bold. Lastly, the key positive Sony currently has up its sleeve for next gen, if they make proper use of it, is The Last of Us 2, and specifically developer Naughty Dog's incredibly robust software-based accessibility settings. The Last of Us 2, which released a few months ago, included pretty much every single software-based accessibility setting imaginable, and implemented them to great effect. We published a video a couple of months back about how robust that game's settings are, to the point that players who are completely sightless are able to effectively navigate this AAA game based solely on sound alone. The game included basically every conceivable accessibility setting, with the exception of audio descriptions, which we also published a recent video about. You can find links to both these videos down in the description. If Sony is smart going into this next generation, I'd love to see them capitalise on how impressive the accessibility support in The Last of Us 2 is. Send Naughty Dog staff to all of your first-party studios. Get them to give a crash course on accessible game design. Make these settings a first-party standard for your new games. Make software-based accessibility a standard on PS5. The Last of Us 2 only came out this year, so these kinds of software-level changes will likely take years to start popping up again in future Sony games, but I really hope Sony sees how great a thing it had on its hands with The Last of Us 2, and pushes for that kind of support in their future software. With Microsoft and Sony's next-generation consoles looming just in the distance, I would say I'm definitely a lot more confident in Microsoft's approach to accessibility. They're supporting all of their old controllers, particularly the Xbox Adaptive Controller, and that is wonderful. That is a great starting point for day one for your console in making it accessible. Beyond that, even though they are supporting old controllers, their new controller is smaller, it's lighter, it's not introducing any new hurdles to gameplay, which is a great thing to hear. Microsoft is open to talking about accessibility. They are addressing it up front. As soon as they announced the Series S and the Series X, they were up front. You'll be able to use your adaptive controller. They knew that accessibility would be a question people had right away when these consoles were announced, and that's really reassuring. That's what I like to see out of a console manufacturer when it comes to accessibility. Sony really has potential next generation to really step things up. If they are to look at what Naughty Dog has done and to make that a first-party standard, to make that an initiative that they do right across their first-party lineup, they're really in a position that they could do some wonderful stuff with accessibility, but right now I mainly have concerns, I have questions, I have worries. Their new controller is mandatory, which shuts off a lot of existing accessibility support. It's heavier, it's larger, it has features that we don't know for certain can be switched off, and Sony as a company have been a lot less forthcoming in talking about their accessibility plans for the PS5. The one time that they tried to ask people, like, what are you worried about with this new controller? They didn't give any feedback and deleted the tweet later, which it's not a welcoming sign. That's the kind of thing that worries me about their next generation plans. It feels complacent, and that worries me. In just a couple of short months, less than that even, we're going to know for certain which of these two boxes on launch day is more accessible to disabled players. There's a lot of questions right now, but if I were a betting person, I'd put my money on Microsoft right now. Everything we have seen publicly suggests that they have a better handle on making sure that day one, their console is more playable by more people. I'd like to be proven wrong. I would love to see Sony secretly have a bunch of accessibility tricks up their sleeve that they just haven't communicated, but I'm not holding my breath. I think Microsoft, on day one, is the safer bet of these two consoles.